Hail to the Barbarian Horde. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Stan.
Hello and greetings.
And just to warn everyone, this stream will remain up no matter what, but I will be downloading it later and reposting it as a video, as videos always get more views and are favored in the algorithm, in my experience. But just to start with, we have Monkey Grip, who says, hopefully I'm not too busy and I'll be back here for the review. Keep up the great work. Conan is the best. Yes, he is.
No argument here.
And you know what, Monkey Grip? We do hope you do manage to join us. So shout out to you. And, well, we'll either way have the review up for you probably sometime next week, as I might do just a few things and add some imagery and whatnot, as I like to do that these days. Although it makes these the re-upload of the streams take longer, because typically you have to chop it up, go into every detail and whatnot, far more than I find than usual videos. So it's a little more time consuming. But Saturday we'll hopefully see a good result, as we have a re-upload coming. And we have Mark. Guten Abend. I guess I will listen in until 11 p.m. Okay.
Guten Abend. I hope I pronounced it right.
Yeah, Guten Abend. Oh, man, I wish we could have learned Deutsch as kids. Yeah, like German and Gaelic are two Western languages I really want to learn, along with Latin and Greek.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I'll ever do that.
And I know I enjoyed learning Spanish.
Yeah, you were good at Spanish. You could still speak a bit of it. I can't.
Sí, hablo un poquito español.
Yeah. Anyways, without further ado, so that way we're not wasting people's time, as I hate videos where guys just wax their character to their own voice, and it's like takes 20 minutes just to get into the subject. So
Sí, continuamos.
Yeah. So in the immortal words of Monty Python, get on with it. Now, the story of the Siege of the Black Citadel starts off, okay, in a bordel, essentially a brothel. Of course, it starts there. And we have a dancer of a very particular sort. She's a lady of the night, and she's dancing for a bunch of guys who are mercenaries. And we then get a guy called Danix, which I don't feel is the most creative name Chuck Dixon could have come up with, but it gets the job done. He ends up distracting Conan, who is at first kind of like, no, out of the way. I'm watching her. I'm not paying attention to you. I don't care what you have to say or do. I'm watching her.
I have a show.
Yeah, it's almost like the wife and the man with the TV. It's like, yeah, honey, whatever. Come back later. That's basically how he acts.
Come back later, get me a beer.
Yeah, and you have every other mercenary just telling him, like, you're never going to get through to Conan. Oh, Austrian accent for a Conan stream would be funny for exactly 2 minutes. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Actually, I wish there was a, this might sound weird, but I wish there was a, I don't know if there is any or not. I do wish there was maybe an Austrian or German doing Conan content on YouTube. That would be interesting because of the accent, and because, well, they'd bring a more, I think, Germanic outlook on things, because most of those I've met are either from Texas, such as Michael Vaughn or Grimdark, those from the South, or they're from the North, like Scandinavia, like World of Conan, or from Quebec or Northern Ontario, which is basically Canada's Scandinavian regions or French regions. So like we have either French/Scandinavian, or we've got Southern.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to have a more Germanic point of view on Conan.
Yeah, and as much as I could learn the grammar and the comprehension of Spanish, if I were to
Mhm.
reapply myself, it'd be a little trickier to have that Hispanic and Latino mentality to Conan.
Yeah. Hey, we've gotten a lot of Spanish-speaking subs. I discovered recently here on Brothers of Orion. That's pretty cool. It's really cool, actually. It makes sense, but because Conan's from Texas mythology and everything. Now, Conan ends up fixated on the dancer girl, and the thing is, one of the guys gets too handsy with her. And this angers Conan, even as he's basically negotiating his price, because Danix offers him a single sack of silver coins, which is quite the good price. It's a lot of money for sneaking into the enemy's citadel, gathering info, and maybe finding a way to slip the army in. But Conan is more concerned about this dancer girl and comes to her rescue, getting angry with the guy who got handsy, beating him bloody, because Conan just also paid her money, which she was very grateful for. And Conan is then hungry to spend some time with her, doesn't, choosing to negotiate his price with Danix. But the problem is the fact that this guy got handsy. Now, what Chuck Dixon did with this scene is really interesting, because I know some people may decide that this is too heroic a side of Conan, but now there's the thing about Conan is, as Michael Vaughn has pointed out rightly quite a few times, he's a reaver and a dangerous man. Conan should never feel safe. He's dangerous. But on the other hand, Conan is chivalrous, as our good friend World of Conan is always keen to emphasize. And even Michael Vaughn has pointed out rightly, like, if there's almost anyone who should be editing a Conan set of comics and novels, it's Michael Vaughn. Yeah. He has an understanding of Howard's Conan, unlike almost anyone else, except maybe Grimdark.
Conan the Barbarian does have a code of conduct.
Yeah. He has his own code of chivalry, of sorts. And if you want to understand how it kind of works, we've already kind of got a video on it. It's called The Morality of the Hyborian Age or whatever. You can find it. Actually, I might post it down below in the comments section, and I'll definitely do that in the video version of this review. But then we're going to, and we have another morality video down the road that's going to come up, but that one's much shorter. And I'm thinking of also getting into a third video about Conan's personal code of honor. But that I kind of would like it to be a compilation video with a few other content creators, just to get their perspectives. I'd want to take notes with them and just get a feel for what they think of Conan's honor. I've got my own ideas, but I want their opinions, and then to take that into account and just make sure I'm on the right track, and basically have them act almost like an editorial board, because I'm used to that from my days as in academia. So I need that board in order to make sure. I just want it to get to fly past them, so that I don't lean too heavily on the chivalry, and bear in mind the barbarism. Yeah, so that's one idea I have for a video. But so yeah, the script would need their approval for such a video. And the only reason I'd want to do that is make sure I'm on the right track. Some of these guys know Conan better than I do. Now, that aside, Conan's chivalry here is in full force. And Chuck Dixon is very well in tune with this side of Conan, who, we have to be honest, Conan has never killed a woman, from what I've read in all the stories. And when I say a woman, I mean a human woman. Demons are a different case. Now with demons, from what I've read so far of the short stories and whatnot, he doesn't actually kill one. But Valeria kills one in order, a sort of demon, an immortal woman, and she kind of saves Conan there and also from having to do that. Howard seems to have been focused on keeping Conan from doing such actions, I think due to the old-fashioned belief that a knight does not harm a lady. And Howard himself was very, very deep down respectful of the female sex. And the thing is, though, the idea was that when it comes to the two sexes, men protect and women support. And also, but the woman can lead. And in such situations, the man needs to respect and support in turn, like what happens with Conan and Valeria, and even Balak to an extent. Conan, like, it's really interesting. But Chuck Dixon is very much in tune with all these sides of Conan right there, and I really like it. He knows what he's doing. Zatho Midas is one of the main commanders of the army besieging the Black Citadel, and he pops up in chapter 2. And no, wait, I got myself mixed up, I think. Oh, yeah. He's trying to take control of the two principal rivers of Koth, because it turns out the Black Citadel is in Koth, or at least what was Koth. And this is one of Koth's many interminable kind of civil wars. And the sad thing for Koth is that at this time, they're constantly caught up in a series of conflicts, internal conflicts. And these internal conflicts we see end up lasting through Hour of the Dragon, where Conan has to go through the lands of Koth, but finds that there's nothing but robber barons and backstabbing merchants who are just keen to, knife at each other. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, the pure violence in that region. Everyone in Hyboria has to deal with it, and then when something happens...
Well, not every region of Hyboria is like that. It's primarily Koth that I'm specifically stating is like this seething hotbed of civil strife.
And
I wonder if it's modeled to an extent after medieval Italy. Like, I know Grimdark has a video on the lore surrounding this region, so maybe I need to go back and watch that video and just as a refresher before I comment. And it would be useful for when we get our Cull fan fiction series finished and we get started on Conan. That way we can get the cultures right, because I do like Grimdark's analysis of the cultures. If there's one person who knows the age of Hyboria the best on a macro level, it would be Grimdark. And yeah, I'm plugging his channel because, like, anyone who's ever listened to his channel knows he's brilliant.
Yeah, and we constantly hear in the Howard works that there's constant trouble in Koth, and not many of the other nations like it when
it bleeds into their borders.
Because whenever they have, for example, a delegation or merchant coming in from Koth,
trouble follows.
It's like, yeah, we don't want to deal with them.
Yeah, and Conan at this time is in his younger days and is a mercenary. And now there is an interesting name to the main general under Zatho Midas. Sorry for that butchering there. And the general's name is General Scythus. And Scythus, which is actually, that's a good name for a character from this era. That's where I think Chuck Dixon, along with the name Zatho Midas, These are good name choices, and I compliment the names because the linguistics in such a story do matter.
I can't help but think of that those seem Greek.
Yeah.
Which your theory on
medieval Italy, or we could also compare to, I think, ancient Greece.
Exactly,
it might
and
be like that.
That might be where Chuck Dixon might be looking at.
Yeah, and you know what? It world builds Koth, but I know in Hour of the Dragon, there's slightly different names used. He also has a reference to Srebonus the King, but we'll get to that. That's in chapter 3. That's the last chapter we'll be reviewing in this stream, as we're just doing the first 3 chapters. We want to do this in threes because, to be quite honest, it helps to break it up like that and allows us to work our way slowly and do this as a book club. And we're always keen to do it as a book club because, well, for one thing, it stretches content. But for another thing, it allows us to get deeper into the lore, kind of slowly work our way through it and see how it fits in the Rubik's Cube. But it also means that you guys and gals, to be fair, can read along with us. So here we go. General Scythus is in command of the Eagle Legion, which that's clearly a reference to Rome with their golden eagle standards. But I kind of would have preferred an actual name, like maybe Legatus or Legio. That'd be it. Legio Augusta the Third, or the Third Legio Augusta unit or legion. This would have felt more Roman, and I often find myself thinking about Rome. I love Rome. Well, anyone who was here for our last stream, I think, knows I've got some Roman history on my bookshelves back there. Actually, one of these days, maybe I'll just put a Roman flag as the picture behind us in the stream. I'll figure that out for the next stream.
Yeah.
Oh man, maybe I'll put up Augustus's favorite legion.
Yeah.
I really like Augustus Caesar.
So we see here that Chuck Dixon,
he's trying to reference Rome, but I think that he kind of face plants here a little because Eagle Legion. Yeah. Why not the Second Legio Augusta or the Third Legio?
We see that he can appreciate Roman history, but he could probably stand to delve a bit more into it.
That said, I will actually overall praise him. Now, if Chuck Dixon sees this video, or later when it's a video instead, if he sees this and ends up going, "Hey, you're criticizing me," which I'm going to say this. He's a best-selling writer who sells, I think, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of copies of every book he writes. So he can be a little, like, he's got the right to be a little annoyed. But all I'd say is I'm going to praise him overall. At least he references Rome in a mythology story here. And so, I'm saying mythology, not fantasy, because Howard predates fantasy, as we're always yammering on about. And most writers of fantasy and mythology never want to go back to Rome. For some reason, they're allergic. I mean, come on, it's only the most glorious empire in ancient history. But at least Chuck Dixon's going, I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to reference that.
We've got Greco-Roman sounding names. We've got references to the Eagle Standard.
But then he has a beautiful reference to the Hottian Empire or Hittites. So that, you know what? I can see what he's doing there. And I really like him. So
the fact that he's willing to reference Hottian history shows that
he's smart.
He's smart.
Yeah. Let's see. Come on. Always a tightrope. Getting too close to the reference might be bad, but too far away and it seems too loose. I agree. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a good tightrope. for the most part, Dixon is someone who's walking the tightrope perfectly. It's just here I kind of feel he slipped a little. He should have been a little closer. But then when you get to the next kind of historic reference he does, he's on the tightrope perfectly. I, for example, see the term legion less as a link to Rome itself, but more like to show this unit is a large and organized as a legion, which didn't exist in medieval times in our history. Yeah, that's fair, but one has to bear in mind there's a lot of inspiration from Greco-Roman civilization with Hyboria, and Howard litters his world with a lot of references. And you look at Aquilonia, it's a bit of a mix between, I think, Rome and the Frankish Empire, or empires, I should say. But then you look at Numidia, it's, I think, rather more Greek. But then you have Koth, which is kind of similar but different. So I think here that when I say the word legion, though, in most stories, I just think like you do. But when I see it in a work like set in Arda or Hyboria, I tend to think rather more towards the Roman link. And that's due to Tolkien and Howard having been very, very, I don't want to say strong, but they make a lot of references to that period of history. Now, Tolkien obviously was developing more in English mythology, Howard more Texan mythology, but there is still that connection to ancient Rome. Both of them honor the Western civilizational debt, I guess you could say, that all Western civilizations have to Greece and Rome. And I'd argue Howard also makes, and even Tolkien, make a lot of nods to Egypt, which the West does owe a lot of gratitude to for a lot of cultural and historic, just gifts. I'll just say that on a cultural, historic level. But I do appreciate your point of view, Mark. You make a good point about try not to read too much into the word legion. But like I said, I go into Conan and I just think legio, or even Kull. Kull basically is ruler of a Roman-esque empire. So that if you use the word legion in Kull, you're no matter what going for a legio, so to speak. But with Conan, it might be reading too much, inserting too much into it on our end. But I still like to look at it more as legio. I think that's what Dixon was looking at. But now where he deserves unending praise is when it's referenced that now I'm looking at my notes. General Scythus had always served the monarchs of Korshemish. Now, this is a reference to Carchemish, which was a city-state under the command of Hati, I believe. And the very fact that Chuck Dixon, I almost said Duck. My gosh, what am I thinking? Donald? You're like, Chuck Dixon looks nothing like him. Actually, he looks better at like 60, I think it is, than Donald does probably at that age. But Chuck Dixon, and the fact that he references the ancient Bronze Age, which, okay, I did my major on my undergraduate on Japanese history and East Asian history. But before that, I was studying right after high school in preparation for my undergrad. I wanted to do it more on the Bronze Age. So I ended up studying the Hittites intensively. And then I ended up going in, deciding, oh no, I want to do Eastern Asian history. Couldn't learn Japanese quick enough. So I ended up doing my research after that in preparation for grad on Western European history, in particular Scotland. And I also tried to study as much as I could on French history. But the fact is, I still have a profound love for the Bronze Age, in particular the Hattians. So for Chuck Dixon to do this nod, this is just, honestly, my heart melted. I was like, thank you, Dixon. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I absolutely love this reference. So, and to learn that such a um, uh, prolific writer, I think that's the word a lot. I've seen a lot of YouTubers use with him. Such a prolific writer, for him to be so versed in ancient history, and technically, the Hittites did give rise to Western civilization as well. For him to be so well versed in that history, and I know people might say, well, it's only a single reference. Yes, but for him to even think of, I'm going to throw a reference to the Hittites, still shows that he's aware of the Hittites, which is more than what I can say for a lot of writers today. But it's honestly very, very pleasing to know that he's at least doing a certain amount of linguistic research into his topic. This is basically a project which was basically him just doing this on a weekend or two, like as a throwaway book. He just did this for fun. It was not a real, I don't know how much money was involved, but he admitted, I think in a stream with, I think it's Ethan Van Sciver, where he said, I did this for fun. And where he had such a blast with this. But you can tell he also put in a lot of work on this, which is something that I must admit I greatly admire and respect about him.
When it comes to Hittite history, as far as historical interest goes,
most people aren't terribly interested.
It's far more niche because people are more interested in Egypt, Greece, Rome, Persia,
England,
and
that's about it in the West. But he went into the Hattans there, and even the later, the Dark Ages after the Bronze Age. Carchemish does play a role in that era, I believe. So this is a great reference he does. It shows his quality as a writer, I think. Now, Scythus and Zathomitis, I'm just always worried that I'm going to mispronounce it. It's a very particular name. Are against Krith, I think his name is. And they're in chapter 3. We have someone new. Actually, it's so small. Alan 2332. Hello. Bonjour.
Yo.
That's over on
Twitch.
Yeah. How come nothing is cropping up? Like, we can't see how many viewers we have right now, which is annoying.
Yeah.
I like to know how many people are watching just for fun. Anyways, where are the hoplite phalanxes in fantasy? I agree. We need more of those.
Indeed.
Like the hoplites were evidently historically completely outgunned and outclassed by the legions of Rome, who were designed to destroy the phalanxes and were a superior version. But the phalanxes have an important part to play in Western history and in military history. And so, anyways, chapter 3 of The Siege of the Black Citadel reveals the number of men that are besieging the Black Citadel. That is to say, 40,000 men, which, wow, that's a lot of men. And I think I can hear the dog. He's going to try to open the door. He did firmly close it, right? Okay, good. Let's hope he doesn't open it. He's been prone to opening the door on his own. Now, let's see. Snow has begun to cover, and I hope I pronounced this right, the Shaitar Pass. And I believe that's Dixon who named that, which, okay. No, I got no criticism. Okay. Like, names are not something I'm going to criticize too harshly, other than Danix. With him, as he's doing a good job selecting names and coming up with names. Shaitar Pass actually sounds like something Howard might have come up with. Anyways, superstition abounds about Strabonus the king as, okay, I'm actually going to look up because I've got the book on my computer. 1 second. Just, the trouble is, the edition we have doesn't really have the page numbers. So, Okay. Okay. So I found the part. Apparently, my notes are not very specific. So on this one point, so evidently, I need to do better with taking my notes. Strabonus is okay. I'll just read directly. More than one says that Strabonus keeps his crown through more than earthly might. There are whispers that he employs dark priests who appeal to dark and forgotten gods to bring them fortune in war. The Black Tower is home to such.
Oh boy.
Now,
Worshippers of Set again?
maybe. Now, as for Krith, this is the Lord of Talus Krith, whom is I think one of the major lords, and he's refusing to surrender despite Scythus trying to tell him surrender. Oh, just to fill in, Alan, we're doing a Conan stream to celebrate our Brothers Barbarian channel reaching 50 subs because people wanted that from us, which, okay. As it's a brand spanking new channel and got to 50 relatively quickly. And we decided to also combine it with a book club of sorts of the Chuck Dixon recently released novel, Siege of the Black Citadel, that has everyone excited about and excited for the past year. So we're discussing that, and then we're going to move to some of the other themes involving Conan. So Conan the Barbarian or Conan the Cimmerian, which, yeah, I actually much prefer Conan the Cimmerian as a title, as that is what he is, the Cimmerian. And when I say the Cimmerian, I mean the, because, you know,
there is no Cimmerian
quite like him. But it seems that Strabonus keeps his crown through dark magics and dark, possible Stygian style worshippers of Set. It might be things to them. Now, bear in mind, I believe, given the time period, I don't know if Snake Pope's in full control in the shadows of Stygia. He might be, but for that timeline, one should perhaps go to Grimdark.
Yeah.
Now, it's at this point that Conan makes it over the wall in the dead of night, and this is where, no, I think it's it's near the end of the day. Sorry, my bad. Either that or early morning. Basically, there's not much light. Well, but there is enough that our besiegers can see a little. Now, the idea is that Zatho, Midas, and General Scythus basically demand of Danix, like, we gave you orders to find someone to, get into the Black Citadel. What's your report? And he reports that, well, I selected Conan for the job. And they note how tall and strong Conan is, as well as how much intelligence there is in his vivid blue eyes. And both of them, like, these upper ranking officers take note of the intellect there and are a little worried, as they're hoping that this doesn't bite them in the rear, because someone, I don't want to say quite so perfect, but someone as strong and as ambitious and intelligent as Conan is not someone you want for an enemy, or getting the idea, maybe I should be in command, as that could lead to some trouble down the road. And this causes them to worry a little. But in terms of the plot, it needs to be remembered that at this point, we're still kind of at the beginning, as Conan scales the wall and ends up on the other side. I only read a little ahead into chapter 4 to find out that Conan selected 6 companions. Now, here Chuck Dixon is making a reference to the number 7, which is a very popular number. 7 days, 777. And in numerology, it's a very lucky, very magical number. And in Western civilization, it's one of, I'd argue, 4 very popular numbers. You have 3, 4, 7, and 9, with 3 and 4 pretty much having their origin in the Bible. 7, I think, is more medieval mythology, and 9 has its roots in Scandinavian culture with Othin, and the number 9 often comes back up time and again in that kind of folklore and mythology, as Scandinavia has very much its own kind of culture that is apart from the rest of Europe. And just as, for example, Germany has a culture very apart from, say, France, or even, well, say Scotland or Ireland, with Scotland and Ireland having more in common with each other than, say, Scotland and England, or England and France, which have very little in common, or Poland and Germany. Those two don't have much in common. So the numerology does play a role, and Chuck Dixon is going back to that. Although now that I think about it, 7 does recur a little in the Bible. So yeah, Chuck Dixon is kind of leaning into this sort of stuff, which is what you want to do in a book like this. You want to lean into such things, because the thing about fantasy and mythology is that it needs to be ground very strongly in the soil, in the fertile soil of archetypes and tradition. And the tradition I refer to as medieval literature. So it's not, there's a reason why, say, George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones has a very short shelf life. And the reason why nobody cares anymore and is forgotten for the most part. Yes, House of the Dragon was very popular, and the series wasn't that badly written. It's not, well, it's more middling in a way. But the thing is, it did not generate the sort of popularity that Game of Thrones did. And Game of Thrones itself was very temporary, because it was all about subverting tradition and old fantasy tropes and folklore. But because of that, it cannot last. It is not planted on firm soil. Chuck Dixon is trying to rely as much on tradition here. And tradition, when it comes to mythology and fantasy, this appeals to the popular imagination, and it likely has a longer shelf life. You look at The Hobbit, at Lord of the Rings, Hour of the Dragon, Silmarillion, and even the rest of the Howard short stories and novellas, they have a long shelf life because of all the tradition in medieval literature and Norse sagas that they have to back them up. Now, that being said, the prose here is very solid. Chuck Dixon, I'm not very well versed on a lot of his writing. Mostly I know him from the Batman and Nightwing comics. I liked No Man's Land and Nightfall and Nightrise.
Yeah.
He had a big say in that stuff. I know he was very influential and very involved with that stuff. But as someone who's kind of moved away from superheroes and tends to think of superheroes as, these days, I'm not very into it. If you like superheroes, love what you love. Don't listen to me. But the reality is that Chuck has very solid prose. He did not choose a Howardian prose here. And it is important to remember that Howard typically writes in a very gritty style, but also a very patient and poetic style. It's rather more like Tolkien's in Victorian English than it is anything modern. And that said, I have read, along with Dan, at least one pastiche novel, Conan the Liberator. That was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I have read the Call the Conqueror pastiche novelization of the movie from the 90s, and it was really good. The style was closer to Howard's than what Conan the Liberator was. So here, weirdly, I found that Chuck Dixon was not really doing an imitation of Howard. Rather, the prose and the stylistic choices are closer to The Hobbit, from what I saw. And I'm actually going to say this. I've been whiny and annoyed about and complaining for more than a decade about how, and then he's nodding a little too eagerly, about how we need another Hobbit, or someone needs to write in that style, in that vein. Because the thing about The Hobbit is it feels much more like fantasy than Lord of the Rings does. Lord of the Rings is more medieval epic romance story. Romance with a Z. You could look up the culture of Toulouse, France, with its connections to Aliénal d'Aquitaine and Henri de and Richard and Jean. It's following more in that de Toul style and tradition. But what the tale, more like how we imagine a fantasy story to be. Chuck Dixon is writing more like Tolkien's Hobbit style. And I actually really like that. And I really think that, you know what? Why hasn't someone done this sooner? Why didn't someone write in this style for Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms? What I don't know anything about Forgotten Realms, but I know it's separate from Dragonlance. I plan for us to do some videos on Forgotten Realms, more the D&D source books and whatnot, just to get started. But also, like, fantasy. The thing is, the fantasy genre moved away from The Hobbit, but why not write a standalone in that style or something? I know Chuck Dixon's writing a sequel, which I actually kind of hope he writes more in the style of Lord of the Rings or something. But this style, this almost kid-friendly way of approaching Conan, I like, as we do need this. And I really like what I've been reading so far.
I mean, it is a far more simpler way of writing. It's a lot more to the point. The chapters are a lot shorter, but we still see the Howardian in it.
Yeah,
it still feels like I'm reading something from Howard,
or at least something that pays homage to Howard. It doesn't feel like Howard to my mind, but it's almost like Tolkien trying to write, like, it's like it's written by Tolkien deciding to write a Conan story, and except he wants to also do it in a way that like his kids could read, as like almost like Tolkien's mixing The Hobbit with Conan and paying homage to Howard. It's a really wonderful mix. Oh, The Hobbit is tricky because one could imagine that Bilbo wrote the story in a way to read and tell to Hobbit children. Yeah, that's basically the frame narrative within The Hobbit. And I do agree, Mark. It's tricky in that way. But when it comes to the actual prose, like from Tolkien and whatnot, no one wants to write this kind of kid-friendly, deep, and I do think deep, story that cuts across all ages and that everyone can enjoy. And that's just simply a fantastic amount of fun. Let's just have fun for a bit. And I think that Chuck Dixon decided that we need that for the Barbarian Age. Let's do that with Conan. And he's doing that here. And I really like that because, and I know that I'm not trying to sound whiny here. I'm actually I'm just loving Dixon. And when it comes to this novel, I'm really loving what he's doing so far in the first 3 chapters. Now, if it gets more adult later, okay, I stand corrected. I've not read very far. I've only read 3 chapters, and I believe there are 12. And so it's, now bear in mind, someone shared with me an online edition. Now, if there's only 12 chapters, and I believe there's only like 134 pages or something, it's really short. It's shorter than The Hobbit. It's a novella, but it's a lot of fun so far. And yeah, I think Chuck Dixon should get a lot of credit. And I believe he's trying to use this as a bit of a, I don't want to say an application, but like an attempt to become the current to get his own Conan run, because from what I understand, the way it works is you get a pastiche novelist, well, a novelist, to write like 3 or 4 pastiche novels of Conan, and what Dixon I think wants to do is basically apply to become the next one, and for the next probably 10 years. And after reading this, like the first 3 chapters, I support it. Like, I wasn't sure before because I'm like, okay, everybody's getting excited. Oh, it's Jack Dixon with Conan. And hey, I get it. He's got a huge fan base, a humongous fan base. I mean, he's at 8,100 subs, I believe, here on YouTube, which that's pretty impressive. But he's, I think, only been doing the YouTube thing for like a year or half a year. That's impressive. But one has to bear in mind he's got a very prolific writer who's been writing for more than probably almost 40 years at this point.
Yeah.
He's earned his success. But I think that's such a big name. Now, okay. He cut his teeth on superheroes. And how I kind of regard it is that, and on comic books, how I kind of regard it as is that such a big name should be on Conan. If he wants the Conan pastiche run, give it to him. He's more than earned it. Although, from what I understand, the one who wrote Blood of the Serpents, he looks like a pretty good, like, I forget who it is. I know it starts with an S, but it looks like his novel is a fantastic epic with Valyria and Conan. It's the first novel in a long time with Valyria, so I support it. And I want to get myself a copy, just that it's currently pretty expensive. But I think that maybe we should have 2 writers with a pastiche run, or 3. And I think that Dixon should be given a chance as well, and should be told, go wild, have fun with what you're doing, as long as it doesn't contradict the Howard stories. And Dixon will go nuts, but in a good way. So let's see. You're right. The combo is the problem. Deep and child-friendly, aka lighthearted, a barbarian with a code is deeper than just a stubborn, too often considered dumb barbarian. Exactly. And the thing is, Conan is a character who is of a genius IQ, rather like Aragorn. He's the same archetype as Aragorn. He's the returning king. But he's also the barbarian archetype, which Grimdark has made a great series of video essays explaining the idea of. He's there to restore the core traditional cultural values of every kingdom he runs into. But the idea of Conan is like Aragorn. He's the most well-traveled man of his time. And he's working his way towards claiming a kingdom as his own and restoring it to its previous glory. But this means that writing someone like Conan is very, very difficult. Deep and child-friendly, aka lighthearted, is very hard. Now, you don't have to, like, lighthearted, I will argue, is not every child story has to be lighthearted. You look at Watership Down, it's not exactly lighthearted, but it's very child-friendly in a way. But what you have specified is very true. There should be a lighthearted element to any Hobbit-style story. And for the most part, not always, but I think a barbarian with a code is a very tricky thing to write, and Dixon understands it. Maybe there's a touch of the barbarian in Dixon. I don't know, but
Maybe.
I'm joking. But he writes Conan very intelligently, and the intelligence of Conan is the important thing. But the mainstream culture has a outlook on Conan that is false, that he's a big dumb brute. Maybe because Arnold Schwarzenegger is not a very bright guy, but hey, I like him as an 80s action star, but from what I've seen, he's not terribly smart, Arnold. But on the other hand, Conan is very intelligent, and for some reason people have equated very strongly Conan with Arnold. And I mean, Arnold's performance as Conan was perfect. It was perfect in the Conan the Barbarian movie. Arnold conveyed every aspect of Conan perfectly. And so I except for the kingship part, because that was not really part of the Conan the Barbarian movie. So, you got trapped in this kind of stereotype when Conan is in the stories is not dumb. And there's also some comic books which portrayed Conan as very dumb. And I've got a bone to pick with some of those comics. I don't like them. But some comics, like the Dark Horse run, portray Conan very intelligently for the most part. There's one or two issues that portray him stupidly, but for the most part, they portray him very intelligently. And
let's face it, if during all his time as a rogue, a mercenary, a bandit, if he just passed by on brute force, he would have died a long time ago.
Yeah.
He has to be able to use his head in order to survive.
And I also find that as a Tolkien fan, I'm insulted when people say Conan is dumb, because if he's the same archetype as Aragorn, this means Aragorn is dumb. But Conan is also the same archetype as the likes of King Arthur, of to an extent even Heracles. But primarily you have Arthur and you have this almost messianic king aspect. And that's the nature of Conan, of Aragorn, and whatnot. Now, that aside, now to the second topic of the stream, which will be the honor and chivalry of Conan, which one leads into the other really well. I just want to lightly touch on the topic. Now, for one thing, the idea with Conan is that he's someone who never goes after women and children, it seems. He also never violates a lady, because weirdly, Conan is very respectful there of the lady in her wishes. Consent is something that's very important to him. He's also someone who often defends the defenseless, but he's also a bit of a rogue. So, now, just to make a slight comparison, Hiei from Yu Hakusho is noted for having a very questionable honor code and for committing betrayals, but then he's angered by betrayal. One might make the comparison to Hiei, but I don't feel that Hiei would be the appropriate person to compare Conan to. Conan has a much deeper honor code than Hiei. And as Hiei's is fairly clear cut once you get into the series, it's easy to understand and comprehend after a while. After like 10 episodes of watching Hiei, you go, I got it. This is his honor code. Arguably, Conan's code of conduct is one that I don't think any superhero fiction could ever approach, as superhero fiction is very simplistic, almost infantile in its outlook. You have good, you have bad, and what's more, now you can have clear-cut good and bad in stories in a very good way and deal with very complex topics. But superheroes, by their nature, is basically murder mystery for kids. That's basically it. And I have seen them deal with some really complex topics, like Truth, Justice, and the American Way, or The Death of Superman, or Jeff Jones and Ethan Van Sciver's entire Green Lantern run, which feels more like a Star Wars story or a great science fiction story. But superheroes, I would argue, is much more simplistic than Conan. And it's not... This has to do with the fact that I think science fiction is not as deep at its core as medieval literature or traditional literature. And that's my opinion. That's not a fact. That's my opinion. That's my view. So if you disagree with me, that's fine. And we've started getting into a bit of science fiction recently on our Sci-Fi Corner channel. And I'm just finding it much more, like I said, different. I don't know why you're getting up.
Just needing the stretch.
Okay. But that said, Conan,
there's a reason.
It's much more philosophical, I guess you could say. It's much more philosophical. You have more stories where Conan or Call or any character of Howard sit down on the throne and just ponder the universe. You have more discussions of metaphysics. You have more discussion of theology, of philosophy, of what's out there, but also murder mystery. You have much more complex topics in regards to relationships, in regards to friendship, honor, and whatnot. But as to chivalry, Conan is someone that, well, he might be more like Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z. Piccolo has a very convoluted, complicated sense of honor, and at least when he's first redeemed. And Piccolo is someone who would have no problem, under other circumstances, slaying someone like Tien Shin Han, who's a very, very moral and upstanding and upright guy. Tien Shin Han has an honor code rather more akin to Superman or something. Arguably, Tien Shin Han does stand for truth, justice, and whatnot, and the American way, which arguably the American way is basically freedom, liberty, and everyone has the right to their own bread and house, roof over their head, and a dog, and enough money from their own hard work. Tien Shin Han stands for all these values. Piccolo and him do not get along at all at first. They don't like each other. Now, on the other hand, Conan does stand for, well, freedom. He's the personification of liberty. He thinks that everyone should be free. And in the Hour of the Dragon, when a character says, well, us peasants should just lie on our bellies and hope that the nobles and the priests just don't notice us and don't hurt us. Conan gets angry at that peasant and has to restrain himself physically from harming that peasant, because he's just like, you're an idiot. Stand up to them. Link your arm with the other peasants and stand up to them. Seize your liberty. Don't kiss their feet.
Don't wait for someone else to solve your problem.
Yeah, you have to solve it yourself. But on the other hand, he has the expectation that men must do this, and that they must band together to shield the woman and even almost serve the woman. And there's a scene in Hour of the Dragon where he basically kneels almost before Zenobia and professes to one day take care of her and help her. And he treats her as the queen of love, the archetype that is from medieval literature. So with Conan, it's a very moralistic, his stories are very moralistic in a way, but they're also charged with this sense of barbarism and the nitty-gritty and the darkness of the world, as Howard was a very melancholic individual. He was a very sad person.
There's a reason why we have a beef with Roy Thomas.
Well, yeah, Roy Thomas. Well, he did some things right. Like, some of his Savage Sword stuff is really good. It's just the main Conan the Barbarian title, which at a few points is very colorful and whatnot. I've got more mixed feelings about Roy Thomas. I like him, but I also find that he wrote some really weird Silver Age stories of Conan. His Savage Sword stuff is more Bronze Age of comics, and that's how you write Conan. But then his Conan the Barbarian run is more Silver Age. The Conan the Barbarian run was more meant, I find, to appeal to children and to Stan Lee in a way, and to appease Stan. Savage Sword was the more like Marvel Max type stuff, and you can see that. I've read some Savage Sword; it's quite good. How Roy Thomas did a great job with a lot of the Savage Sword stuff. So I don't know if I'd say I have a beef with him. I have mixed feelings. I find Conan the Barbarian's not as good as Savage Sword. Savage Sword is quite good. Didn't watch Dragon Ball. I'm a One Piece guy. I've been for over 2 decades. I despise One Piece.
I never could get into it.
But if you like One Piece, Mark, don't listen to us. Love what you love. But yeah, to any Roy Thomas fans, if you're like a fervent fan of his, he's got a very, very dedicated fan base that believes him to be the fount of all the greatness that's in Conan. My argument is more that he's more middle, down the road. He's middling. And I know some are going to take offense. Don't hit that unsub button. We've read like I think 50 issues or so of his regular run, and now when it comes to the honor of Conan, he does a great job, but
The regular run,
is a little weird.
there are
And
some stories that are really, really good.
but you know what? I kind of like. I'd rather Roy Thomas's than a lot of other writers because you can see the creativity. Like the thing is, he's either really good or really bad, and I would prefer that in with any writer because you want really bad or really good because that way the lows are low, sure, okay, but the highs are really high.
But at least it's not Conan the Liberator.
Yeah, that's true. I expect nothing less from a guy who likes Orodreth, especially as Gilgalad's father. Yeah, yeah. That said, I do like Fingon. And I think that, for example, Palantides and Prospero from the Conan stories are rather like Fingon. They're of higher rank than Conan initially, but they follow Conan very loyally, and they call him Lord out of friendship. And the relationship is very much like a sworn brother between Maethras and Fingon. This is the kind of bond you see between Conan and Palantides and Prospero. And it's almost like the Les Trois Mousquetaires between the three. Um, and it's interesting that you see the kind of similar, even Dracaro in a way is like Fingon. You see this kind of archetypal friendship between Fingon and Maethras, which I really love. I love that bromance. Actually, in hindsight, it might be one of the best bromances in the Silmarillion. Oh my gosh, Dan! Wait till you get to the great act of bromantic heroism on the part of Fingon for Maethras.
Definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah. And Conan has a lot of those scenes. That said, when it comes to the chivalry of Conan, his honor code, I'm just thinking. I'm wondering if there's a Tolkien reference we can make. Maybe Aragorn is the right choice. As Aragorn at one point threatens a messenger, an ambassador. Remember that. The ambassador says, "Dibs on your sword." And Aragorn says, "You make a grab, I will end you. I will end you right here and now. Diplomatic immunity or no. Don't you dare speak that way of my sword again. I will not tolerate such behavior from an ambassador. Nor will you speak of me in such a way, yes, you're the mouth of Sauron, but mind your tongue." And Aragorn is so menacing in that moment. You have no doubt he would have no problem drawing the sword and whatnot. But he restrains himself out of courtesy. He restrains himself out of politeness. And there's that English self-discipline from the Victorian era. Whereas with Conan, I'm just going to wait for the internet to kind of fix itself, because our connection's weird. All right. Whereas Conan has slain a man for being rude to him in the Tower of the Elephant, or Elephant Tower. In that story, he slays a man for being rude to him because he just asks the guy, "Why are you being so rude to me?" And the guy just keeps being rude to him, so Conan just cuts him down. And the idea is that that rudeness is something civilized society has, because that such people have no need to fear their skulls being split. And Conan does not tolerate rudeness. Now, on the other hand, by the time he's king, he tolerates it a little because he's learned to play the political games. But that doesn't mean he has much patience for it or likes it. And he's very strict with his courtiers and nobles, and he demands and expects loyalty from them. But in turn, he offers them in turn friendship and his favor, so that the idea here is that Conan is building a kingdom of friendship, of friends and honor in a way. and he values his friends very, very highly. Now, on the other hand, I'm actually going to say something that World of Conan has many times disagreed with me, and I've many times disagreed with him. But we've done so very politely with each other. In one of the stories of Conan, there's reference to Conan's seraglio, and that he has a harem and many lovers, and he fears for them. And I forget which story it is. We'll have to do a book club of the story as soon as I find it. It's the second story where Conan's king, after Phoenix on the Sword. It's a sequel to the Phoenix on the Sword story. Doubtless there will be a Conan fan who will tell us in the comments section. It was this story. So if you know the story, thank you. But in there, here's the thing. Conan may have his honor, but he's not monogamous. Now, I know World of Conan will say, no, he's firmly monogamous. No, he's polygamous, at least from what I've read of the stories. And World of Conan can disagree with me, but I will stick to what I've read of Howard's stories. And the thing is, Conan has many girlfriends. And given how not every short story or comic has these girlfriends dying within 2 stories, and some of them, such as, say, I think Yasmina, Conan vows to reclaim as his own one day. And she's all but saying, all right, I'll wait for you. In turn, you have, I think it's Yasmina. It might be someone else. In turn, you have Valyria, whom it's very hard to see her dying all of a sudden in combat, especially as she's like, she's compared to, I think, Laughing Chaos or something, as she's cutting men down like they're nothing in a battle and laughing as she's doing it, rather like Conan. She's like a female Conan. So, but the thing is, Valyria is a few years younger than Conan. And I have a hard time seeing her die in battle. Anyone who says, yeah, she probably dies in battle, I wouldn't regard such a story as canon. So she's probably in the seraglio. But what's she doing in Hour of the Dragon? We don't know, because she wasn't thought of yet until after the Hour of the Dragon. But at the end of Red Nails, she basically swears her loyalty and love for Conan, and that she's not going to let him out of her sight. So, yeah, Conan is polygamous, but the love of his life is Zenobia, because this is basically stated as fact in Hour of the Dragon. Conan does not choose a queen until he meets Zenobia. And Hour of the Dragon is basically a story of, okay, in Lord of the Rings, Aragorn's motivation is Arwen. He wants to claim his kingdom to make Arwen his queen. Conan wants Zenobia to be his queen. It's basically the same journey. So there, he's doing it out of honor for his lady and loyalty to her and love for her. And so what we have is, this is part of his journey. Now, does this mean that he's suddenly going to swear off the other ladies in the seraglio for Zenobia? No. Will Zenobia expect him to? No. The time period Howard is establishing the stories in is much more polygamous. It's a pre-Christian past in a way.
Especially the higher up in society you are, the more likely that you're going to have mistresses,
concubines, and multiple wives. Now, that said, Aquilonia has a concubinage mistress-based system, but possibly only one wife, the queen. So, in that regard, Conan has the many mistresses, lovers, and whatnot. Now, it's specified he does not have a son in Hour of the Dragon, so that is the lore. On the other hand, it's not stated that he doesn't have a girlfriend or a woman at the time. Conan is someone who doesn't like to sleep alone, as shown in many stories. But what he does do with his woman is that he treats them very well. He's honorable. He's courteous. He'll even do quests for them. He'll go questing for them. He'll go and rescue them. If they say, well, fetch me this Conan, he embarks on a great journey with occasionally some of his guy friends, goes off and fetches them a great jewel or whatever, and comes back to earn their love. and prove his love to them. And so there's something very chivalrous about Conan.
It's like he's a more barbaric version of Gawain.
Yeah, that's probably it. That's very apt. So this is all archetypal, though. Now, when we go to do a examination of the chivalry and honor of Conan in greater detail as a separate video, what I want to do now, I might slice the stream up in half. No, I'm not going to private this stream. You guys can watch it for as long as you want or rewatch it. But when I go to make this a video, what I might do is slash in half. One half will be the Black Citadel review that I'll post on a Thursday or something. And the other half I'll post as a maybe part of the philosophy and morality of Conan the Barbarian universe or Hyborian Age. And I prefer Hyborian Age. For some reason, the Conan the Barbarian title, I just don't care about. I prefer Conan the Cimmerian. But I know Conan the Barbarian is more popular imagination, whatever. But I think that Conan is... when I go to do that thesis video of sorts, I'm probably going to focus more on the... I would want to focus also on the Gawain aspect and whatnot and this knight, but I'd want to kind of focus for a portion, like, yes, on the chivalry, but also on the specifics of Conan's honor code. But then I would want to do a separate video maybe on him as a knight, him in that archetype. And I think that the archetype must be separated from the honor. The honor is a very character-based thing rather than an archetype thing. Whereas to get into the chivalry stuff, I might do a separate playlist for the different archetypal aspects of Conan and the different archetypes of the different characters of Conan's support cast, such as Valyria, Pallantides, Baelet, and get deeper into their archetypes.
Now,
but I think that for Cull and Brull, I would want to get into them at some point. Maybe what we'll do is a archetypes of the Hyborian and Thurian ages, or like just archetypes of the Conan mythos as the name for the playlist. But I might just copy over the videos we already made of the great loves of Conan. But I think for that, our views on Baelet have changed somewhat. So maybe what I want to do is upload the old one to Brothers Hyborian and then do a revamped video before we continue with the other loves of Conan. And then maybe touch on Baelet as an archetype, just purely as an archetype. And then just the Great Loves playlist will be an examination of the characters and then of their archetypal aspects.
One thing that I noticed is that with Conan, he won't strike a lady.
Never.
But if a woman betrays him in such a way, or generally
actually endangers people's lives and tries to kill them,
he is willing to be a bit of a douche with them.
Yes, a showerhead, because that's what the word douche means in French.
For example, the time where he tossed a woman out the window into some
a pile of dung. It was like a small mountain of dung. Barb. It was basically human and animal feces. And what he does is he says, before I do the mission or the quest I've been paid to do by this other guy as a mercenary, because he was imprisoned and I think tortured a little. Then he was hired as a hitman to help save a decent guy from I think a demon. I think it was the story of Thrak, I think it is, or Thak. And he goes off, fetches the woman who betrayed him for her own lover. He picks her up, and there's a great Dark Horse comic book run on all about this relationship with her and how she betrayed him and how he gets even. But the end of the story with her is just this. He picks her up after scaring her half to death because she thinks he's there to slay her. He picks her up, tosses her into the pile of dung, and laughs at her loudly just laughing till his belly almost bursts. And she's screeching and going, "No, it's in my hair," and whatnot down there, I think in the comic. And she goes, "I'll get you for this. How dare you? I can't believe you did this to me." Well, he's laughing and then going, "Okay, now I'm ready to do what you asked me. So what were you asking me of me?" 1 second. And then he keeps laughing. And like the guy explains, you need to do this, a little dumbfounded by what he's done. As the guy thought he was going to kill this girl, but Conan would never hurt a lady, but he will humiliate her. But the way he'll humiliate her is more like a trickster. He's more having fun. He's not doing any real harm.
He just wants to get even with them.
Yeah, but without actually doing anything harmful to their health. If anything, I would compare how he treats them more akin to maybe how Bilbo treated. No, not Bilbo. Well, Bilbo can be mischievous, so Bilbo might be the right character to compare to, or or maybe occasionally Othin in Norse mythology. Othin's a bit of a trickster and can be mischievous. But anyways, I think we've talked enough. That's almost an hour and a half. I don't have much more to discuss. I do hope people will join us. I hope you didn't mind us disagreeing too much with you, Mark. As always, you've been very delightful.
Very much a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm just hoping we've hit 70 subs on Brother Saborian, as we're very near last time I checked, and it's something that got me very excited as we suddenly started growing the other day, like by a lot. We're still at 69. Okay, so if anyone enjoyed this stream, and you enjoyed our discussion and our review here, don't forget to go smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Conan and his beloved Zenobia smashing their enemies to itty-bitty pieces on their honeymoon.